Welcome to Diversity and Inclusion Now. It's a half-hour show that allows people to discuss strategies and techniques that will transform communities on a global, national, and local level. And I'm super excited about my guest today because I really want people to come in and share their expertise, especially in the space of diversity and inclusion. And today I have someone that's a dear friend of mine, a dear friend to our family, but also we share a lot of common bonds, not only personally, but also on a professional level, as well as community engagement as well. I'll just sum it up that way and you'll hear all about that. So to get started, I want to say welcome Javette Hines to Diversity and Inclusion Now.
Very much an honor to be here today. Super excited that you have me speaking, not just about my background personally, but professionally, what I do every day. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I am excited because I know that you can share, just when you share about yourself personally, which is where I want to start and begin, because I think it's good to understand someone where they're coming from and who they are and how they arrived into the professional field that they're in today. So just tell me a little bit about yourself, your upbringing, your background, the school you attended, where you lived, just a little bit more about Javette.
Sure. So I am a Southerner. I actually was born in Atlanta, Georgia, and grew up in LaGrange, Georgia, so just a little bit south of Atlanta. I attended Clark Atlanta University, so HBCU.
HBCU.
Absolutely. And then went to law school at Wake Forest University School of
You went
Law.
to Wake Forest?
Wake Forest.
North Carolina.
North Carolina. In fact, I was a hall director my last year, and Tim Duncan, that's my only claim to fame at Wake Forest, was actually in my dorm. So yes,
Nice,
absolutely.
nice.
Yeah. So spent some time in North Carolina, but prior to that, actually, I taught 7th grade for a year. After undergrad, I started out as a music major because, you know, underneath all the things I love to do personally now, I am really an artist at heart. But ultimately, I knew that I needed to make sure I had something that I could fall back on, but most importantly, have the kind of background that would allow me the true community engagement and expertise that could be helpful sometime later in my life.
Right, and I think you play the guitar. Right?
I do play a little bit. I try to
Okay.
sing a little bit. I'm looking forward to really going in the village one day and really playing some tunes, but maybe after Kennedy finishes school. We'll see.
Right. Now, HBCU, you know, that's a decision that was really, you know, for me as I was thinking about going on to school. Should I do HBCU or not? Tell me, how did you arrive at HBCU?
For me, it quite frankly really was a no-brainer. I looked at a number of schools, you know, being in LaGrange, and of course, you're influenced by a number of factors. I had a music teacher, so initially I even looked at Auburn University. But quite frankly, it became a choice between looking at Howard University and Clark Atlanta University. And ultimately, it was Clark Atlanta because it was close to home. And quite frankly, I was also a first-generation college student. So Clark Atlanta held a lot of promise for me. You know, a lot of people from in the area had gone to Clark Atlanta.
Right.
And so as soon as I got there, I felt like I was at home. And for me, having gone to an HBCU, there's nothing like it. Wouldn't trade it for the world. Ultimately, the experience at CAU or Clark College at the time, being in the midst of whether it's Spelman, Morehouse, Morris Brown at the time, it was just an amazing experience, an opportunity to get to know so many leaders. But more importantly, I think really to be compelled to action and to
Right.
community service. And our motto is, I'll find a way or make one. So that has just been a consistent thread of who I am as a part of my own upbringing, but certainly attending Clark Atlanta University.
Right. And quickly, I wanted to touch upon, because from a diversity standpoint, what I hear HBCUs, some of them struggle, right? And is there anything you could share with our listeners on how they can help support HBCUs?
I think, you know, if we think about the fact that from a diversity perspective, for such a long time, we did not have many choices as people of color to
Right.
go where it was that we wanted to go to school. So you had a number of HBCUs, and you had a number of people who did not necessarily happen to be black. They were people who cared about education and the training and the advancement of people of color. So I think when you think about these institutions, some that have been around for such a very long time, that have withstood the test of time, produce lawyers, doctors, accountants, educators, all kinds of people, that is reason in and of itself to continue to the advancement, to support them engineers, mathematicians. They're just amazing institutions. And I think what you'll find is that many HBCU graduates are the greatest contributors, not just here in the United States, but quite frankly in the world. So I think that's the thing people have to really think about. I know that when I first attended law school, some people would say, why would you go to an HBCU school? There's never a question about it. When you go there, it feels like home. But more importantly, you feel like you are in command and in control in terms of your own destiny, and you have the kind of support network that is constantly there. That hasn't changed for me 30-something years later. And I think that's the thing that continues to be consistently important about HBCUs today. So I definitely encourage that. I hope my child will attend undergrad as an HBCU and continue that legacy.
That's fantastic. And I know you're also involved in the community. Do you want to share some of your community involvement?
Absolutely. Of course, as I said, community service is a big thing for me anyway. So it's been something near and dear to my heart since I was a kid. So whether that was singing at church or tutoring or mentoring, etc. And then, of course, going to Clark Atlanta, being in the AU Center, my initiation into Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated some 30 years ago, that has been a consistent thread of who I am, giving back to people, working with seniors, going to the nursing home, packaging food, things of that nature, and then ultimately the Links Incorporated, and then even Jack and Jill Incorporated. All these organizations have provided so much to so many, and then so many of us belong to them, not because we are necessarily getting some new label by being a part of them, but we have so much to give. And the opportunity to network in that vein, to understand what's happening in the community, how do we make changes and transformational opportunities occur, whether it's with kids or people in different countries or whatever, that's been the benefit of belonging to those organizations. The thing is, I think you always have to think about is, how much time you can't give all of yourself to an organization, right? You have to have a little bit of balance, but that has been the most meaningful thing for me to develop amazing relationships, continue that thread of community service and engagement. And then the good news about all three of them is that in some instance, just like with work, they're not only domestic organizations, but they're global in scale, and that's been an amazing plus for me.
So this has been great. Hearing from Javette, we have a few things in common: Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated, the Links Incorporated, and the Jack and Jill Incorporated. And from what you could hear, being community service minded also impacts our community overall. And some of the issues we do have from an inclusion standpoint, we can all make a difference. And also, her sharing her story about HBCUs, I thought that was fabulous because it gives you a sense of there's another alternative. And we can hear from her firsthand the impact it has had on her personally, but also you could see how now she's really involved in making change, not only in her community, but globally. And we're going to hear about that on a global scale next.
What if you could invest in the future of kids, like a stock? Not the kind of stock that's about making money, but a stock for social change. A whole new kind of investment called Better Futures. When you invest, it helps kids go to college. Believe in us, invest in us, watch us grow. My name is Sydney, and I'm your dividend.
Lift every voice and sing.
Helen Diane Foster represented District 16 in the New York City Council, which comprises of the neighborhoods Morrisania, Highbridge, and Morris Heights. She was the first Black woman in the Bronx to be elected to the City Council. She's also a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority.
Bronx Black History Makers!
Welcome back to Diversity and Inclusion Now. And I'm here with my special guest, Javette Hines. And we heard about her personally, and now I just want to transition into her professional career. And there's one aspect that we have in common is that we're both professionals in the space of diversity and inclusion. And there's one area for me that I've always didn't know exactly everything about, but I'm always curious about it. And I think it's another way of impacting our community, especially from a financial business standpoint. So I would like for Javette to share with us and get right into it. What is supplier diversity?
Rachel, thank you for asking me that question. It's a question that it comes to me often, and people get supplier diversity confused. They think sometimes it's either community development or is social advantage or things of that nature. Supplier diversity, quite frankly, is a practice that is very integrated into a business process. It really is a process that thinks about strategic sourcing. How do you select the right suppliers for opportunities to do business with the corporation? And quite frankly, that's sourcing. You're looking for suppliers to provide a good or a service to a corporation or a firm. And then the other aspect of that, when you're talking about the diversity piece of it, is now making sure you have someone who has a seat at the table, taking a look at those from whom you are asking to purchase those goods and services. Do they happen to be women, minorities, people with disabilities, LGBTQ? So part of my role and that of many of my counterparts is similar to an HR diversity perspective. You're looking at who you're hiring to make sure you have diversity and inclusion considered. For me, it's making sure within the corporation we are constantly looking at making sure, do we have diverse suppliers who have a seat at the table? Do they have an opportunity to be considered? And the key thing about that really is whether it's the supplier who's looking to do business with a firm or the corporation, thinking about what are the, what are the key business drivers that you have? What is it, the skill that you provide? Are you providing the tables, the chairs? Are you providing, logistics? Are you providing hardware, software? This is all what procurement and sourcing is about. And so my goal as someone who sits within a enterprise supply chain or supply chain organization is to make sure that we're doing business that ultimately creates an economic impact in the community. So again, similar to workforce diversity, but just looking at the business aspect.
Absolutely. Now, I've often heard about this billion-dollar club.
Right.
I don't know. Could you share a little bit more about that and what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, absolutely. When I started supplier diversity or working in that space many moons ago and corporation ago, many of us aspired to continue to grow and evolve so that you would be in the billion-dollar roundtable club. The billion-dollar roundtable club is based on how much spend you have with diverse suppliers. When supplier diversity did start, let's just say almost 50 years ago at this point, some part of it was compliance driven. It was about looking at civil rights and legislation to put in place to make sure diverse suppliers were considered. But ultimately, corporations, were smart enough to know that diversity meant innovation. It didn't mean a set aside. And so then corporations start to establish very specific goals. How much am I actually spending with diverse firms, with minorities, with women, and then ultimately LGBTQ and veterans and people with disabilities. So the billion-dollar roundtable really makes us kind of take a look at how much spend are we actually tracking, tier one, paying a supplier directly, but at the same time, an aspect of it is the capacity building. What are you also doing to continuously build suppliers as well?
Wait, explain that piece.
Yes.
The capacity building.
Okay, so the first part, of course, the spend. That's the $1 billion. So if you spend the $1 billion, that's an amazing thing. But the other piece of it is making sure that you're looking at all suppliers, whether it's that small supplier who may be 0 to 1 million, or that larger supplier that may fit in what's perhaps called category 4, 50 million to $1 billion. Suppliers are varying size and scales. Not every supplier will be able to do business with a corporation, but they may be able to do business with one another. The corporation belongs to a number of different organizations that focused on trying to meet you where you are. What is your opportunity for scale? Are you a local supplier, are you a niche supplier? Can you do business globally? And capacity is creating those opportunities or those workshops, et cetera, to kind of get you up to scale, to make sure you understand how to do business with corporations. Do you understand AI? Do you understand sustainability? Do you understand risk and controls, all the things that are important to us, in addition to clearly being able to manage your business and provide the goods and services to us?
Perfect. Now, you said a couple of words, key words here, because I know these buzzwords.
Right.
So you said supply chain management, but you also said sustainability.
Yes.
Are they two of the same or are they different? Give us a little bit more about that.
They're really integrated. Supplier diversity, generally, when it first, started, it was focused on solely supplier diversity, but several of us also have sustainability as a part of our background. Traditionally, when people think of sustainability, they think about it solely from an environmental perspective. my role, and I manage both supplier diversity and supply chain sustainability, is looking at suppliers and how they engage with us relative to the environmental impact, right? What is it that they're doing and ensuring they don't impact the environment in a harmful way, but also human rights and labor law considerations, making sure that any suppliers, and that's not just diverse suppliers, it's all suppliers, they look at our corporate responsibility questionnaire. They can ensure that, you know, the way that they look at their supply chain, they're not impacting us in any way. There is no child labor, no forced labor, modern day slavery. All of these kinds of things are very important in terms of the supply chain and how we do business. So for me, one of the big things I do try to do separately with some diverse suppliers with these organizations is to ensure that diverse suppliers do understand sustainability at its broadest level, from an environmental perspective, human rights, labor law consideration, but also taking a look at what kind of policies do you also have in place so that they mirror the very corporations that you also want to do business with.
This is fantastic. I mean, you really helped me understand. I've been in this space for a while, but you hear a lot of these terms, but you would clearly articulated, you know, what is supplier diversity? How is it different from sustainability and the $1 Billion Club? So in closing out this segment, just tell me quickly, do you think that companies have arrived in terms of where we want to go with supplier diversity, and where do you think it should go? You know, are we there today, and where should we go with it?
I think certainly we have moved beyond 40 years ago from where we started, right, where people thought it was a social kind of thing that you're just utilizing suppliers and you're saying they're diverse and that's okay. No, the expectation is that diversity is just the ticket that gets you into the door.
Right.
Diverse simply means you're a differentiator, but at the end of the day, some of the diverse suppliers have been the most innovative of all. So I think we have advanced to the point where diverse suppliers are included because they're good suppliers. It's an opportunity to advance our business needs, but we have to continue to go in that direction of understanding it's about business. It's not a set aside. It's not a special kind of thing to consider. It's truly about building business. And I think the fact that we are now looking at supplier diversity from a global as well as a U.S. lens is really the key indicator that we're continuing to advance into the next level of supplier diversity.
Well, you said it best. Supply diversity is about business. And now we're going to move into the next segment where we're going to hear about how you can become a diverse supplier and what are the techniques or what are the things, strategies you need to focus on. And we'll hear it next from Javette Hines.
Your girls have been with you through every moment of your life. They were with you when you felt unbreakable, and with you when you had your heart broken. They were with you when you shared your love with the world, and with you when she became your world. They're still with you right now. But how well do you know them?
Lift every voice and sing.
Michael Blake was responsible for the grassroots efforts with electing our country's first African-American president, Barack Obama. Currently, he is an assemblyman in the 79th District in the Bronx and is the vice chair for the Democratic National Committee. He's also my godfather.
Bronx Black History Makers!
Welcome back to Diversity and Inclusion Now. In the last segment, we learned a lot about the evolution of supplier diversity, the various aspects of it. But now I really want to touch upon what's the guidance we can give someone that really wants to go become a diverse supplier, what are the resources needed, and just what kind of support should they expect when they do become a diverse supplier.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for that, Rachel. I guess I'll just take a step back. You know, when I think about the evolution of supplier diversity, again, starting around 1970, 72, the whole civil rights legislation, and now we've evolved to more strategic business opportunities. So I guess the net is that we've crossed many rivers, right? But we still, I mean, some tangible progress, but there's still more to make. And some part of that is, from a diverse supplier perspective, it is understanding that if you're a supplier and you're small, you have to really think about what kind of business opportunity do you have? You know, who is it that you're interested in doing business with? What's your size, your scale, your scope? And that will help you to determine whether or not you want to do business with a city as an example, or if you want to do business with another MBE, or even if you want to do more tier 2, where you're getting some opportunity to be a subcontractor. And then at the same time, for that person who's in the supplier diversity space, the backgrounds vary. Traditionally, you have supplier diversity professionals who usually do understand procurement, but there are some in the marketing space, workforce diversity space, et cetera. But I would say the key thing for those who continue to advance in the field of supplier diversity, in order to be the best for suppliers, you want to make sure you understand supply chain management at the highest level so that you can understand what potential categories does your supplier have an opportunity to do business in? Are they in travel and logistics? Again, are they in the facilities management space? Are they a broker dealer? Are they asset managers? Whatever it is, you want to make sure that you understand enough about them so that you can be an advocate for them. Because while supplier diversity traditionally is held in the supply chain space, you still have to engage with your lines of business within the corporation. And so in order to bring them along and to be engaged and be clear about diverse suppliers, you need to understand their business. So I think for diverse suppliers, really know your size, your scale, your scope. Are you ready to do business on a large scale? Can you handle a $20 million contract, or is it a $5 million contract? Can you handle a $50 billion contract? You have to think about that. And then it's also thinking about, and if you are going to be a globally scaled supplier, going back to sustainability again. Sustainability in a different way. One, how sustainable is your business currently, right? Are you able to manage risk? Do you have the right number of people working for you? Do you have the right licenses in place to take you to the next level? And then when it comes to sustainability proper, as I talked about it earlier, the environmental piece, human rights, et cetera. Do you have the right policies in place that protect you and that basically align you with the same firms that you want to do business with? All those things are super important. The other piece, though, that's so important for diverse suppliers is that there's so many organizations that exist from a membership perspective, and they focus on certification. You will find that many of us as corporations, we look to do business with suppliers who are certified, and that means they are in fact 51% owned, operated, managed, and controlled. And again, that's the ticket into the door.
That's right.
Once you have that, we're very clear, you're diverse, wonderful. Now it is, okay, now in terms of doing business with us, now let's talk about that so that when you're responding to a bid or to an opportunity, now we're solely talking about the business aspect. But there is the National Minority Supplier Development Council, there's Women's Business Enterprise National Council, National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, numerous veterans organizations that really can help with diverse suppliers, and that, again, capacity building, workshops, engagement, and awareness, or I guess enhancement of where they are, but then just expertise in terms of development.
Because those, from what I've heard, the application process is very challenging. So knowing those organizations and getting the right support right up front can help probably minimize the time it takes to really become a certified supplier. Then, if you come across Javette, you'll be lucky enough to have someone who's also an attorney. You not only know the supply management standpoint, but you bring the business side as well to the table to help you figure out what's the next level.
Absolutely, and that's the thing about being a part of these organizations. Many of us, from a supplier diversity perspective, our goal is to be an advocate, but to also to train and continue that development. And so one of the things I think is also important is for diverse suppliers, as you think about your growth and your evolution in terms of growing as a diverse supplier, being certified, being a member of one of these organizations, participating in conferences, engaging in real and meaningful dialogue, paying attention to corporations and their citizenship reports and taking a look at their corporate reports. That gives you a sense of what we're spending, how much we're spending, what's important to us. And then you make some determination of which companies you want to do business with and what is they're saying that's important to you. And then the final thing I'll say is looking at the Sustainable Development Goals. Too often, diverse suppliers, or many even those of us in this field, are not really looking at those UN, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals or the global goals.
They're like 50 goals. Is it 50
there was 17 goals, and then by 2030, as the global world, we are supposed to be working together to meet some of those targets. If people start to think about supplier diversity and align it with sustainability or sustainable development goals, sustainability is covered under that because you're talking about the reduction of inequalities. You're talking about gender equality. bounty. You're talking about water, you're talking about partnership goals, you're talking about all these things that ultimately lead to economic impact, growth, and development across the global world. You don't then get caught in thinking about whether something's a set aside of diversity, because you're talking about progress and peace and prosperity at a global level. So the Sustainable Development Goals, I think, is something we all have to think about, and then we integrate the whole thought about size, scale, scope. We're all then on the same page. We're doing supplier diversity right because we understand it as a business need, not a social function, but something that's necessary in our everyday business.
Before we close, quickly, 30 seconds,
Sure.
what brings you joy in this role?
What brings me joy? You know, this has actually been an amazing experience. When I started it, I remember sponsors saying, you don't want to do that because you'll get stuck doing it forever. And you're a lawyer, you should be doing more procurement stuff, anything.
Right.
But it brings me joy because there's innovation consistently. It brings me joy because this is a space, even for my daughter, she's had an opportunity to meet other diverse firms, be exposed to these organizations that I've participated in, been exposed to the United Nations and been able to sit around the table and hear these different countries speak. So this is
And
the
travel with
and
you
to travel
and
with
see
me as
you
well,
in action
and
as
to see
well.
me in action. So those things give me joy in this space because I feel that the background that I have, I'm not practicing law, I'm a licensed attorney, but I've been able to integrate my experience into everything that I do. And I work for a corporation that has allowed me to be very entrepreneurial and experienced to get global experience out of this as well.
Perfect. Well, it's wonderful. And again, thank you, Javette, for coming on the show and really raising the awareness about an issue that I think is very important from an economic
Thank you.
standpoint. It's not a nice thing to do. I think it's something that we all must do, especially from a sustainability standpoint. So thank you for what you do on a day-to-day basis. And that concludes this segment of Diversity and Inclusion Now.
Operation Wonder Park is a go!
There's nothing more powerful than imagination.
Honey, have you seen my cell phone?
But don't just imagine.
My park came to life?
Ooh, a plot twist!
Use STEM to build, create,
She did it!
and change the world.
Who's with me?
I'm more of a 2 feet on the ground kind of guy.
It's gonna hurt tomorrow.
If she can STEM, so can you. Find out more at She Can STEM.
I see the future is really bright for me. The high school diploma is just added to the confidence, and now I feel unstoppable.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
I already knew that I was gonna go to college, from a young age. I definitely want to major in political science, become the mayor or something, make the situation better for other people. My name is Justin, and I am your dividend.